like this, life to the full, and yet we can feel so empty. Relatively speaking, in the West, we have so much materially, yet left feeling so empty, devoid of time and energy. And so this year, God is calling us, he's calling you individually, us together, he's calling me, to make room. And so this year, we're going to be focusing simply on Jesus, the one who alone brings fullness to our lives through salvation. So this is why we have the verse for the year, John 10:10. And we're going to be following that with a series from going through the beginning of Mark's Gospel, which will take us up to Easter, called Mark My Words. Hopefully you like the play on words there. Is that just my sense of humor that appreciates that? Anyway, a good friend, David Clark, of mine and now of our church, he'll be kickstarting that series for us next week on the 19th of January. But that's next week's business. So let's look at our passage. And what we're going to do this morning is we're going to take this from a couple of different angles, because there's some key things here. And we're going to be looking at what it means to be living life to the full. But before we get to that, we need to deal with the thieves and the robbers that our verse for the year mentions. And it specifically says, it's a strong warning, isn't it, that there are thieves and robbers that are there only to kill, steal, and destroy. Now, when Megan and I, we were at our previous church, we basically lived inside the church building. There was a flat that was right at the top of the church building. One night, we were fast asleep, and Megan, she wakes me up and she nudges me awake, and she says, James, there's someone downstairs. There's someone downstairs. I can hear something. So I wake up, kind of blurry-eyed, kind of, what are you doing waking me up? We got young kids kind of thing. And I sit and I listen for a few moments, and I don't really hear anything. I don't hear anything at all. And so I say, it's probably nothing, and go back to sleep. Well, the next morning, I got up and I went downstairs, and it was carnage everywhere. Someone had broken into the church. They had tried to get in all to these different rooms. They tried to get into the office. They tried to get into the safe. And they had left a massive mess everywhere. A thief had broken in to literally destroy and to steal. Who knows if they were there to kill? Hopefully not. But undercutting this wonderful verse of the year in verse 10 is a pastoral warning that there are thieves and robbers that are trying to break in to kill, steal, and destroy our faith and trust in relationship with Jesus. Now, you would think that if there was a robber that was breaking in to our homes or our buildings or our lives, then it would be kind of obvious, right? We might think it might be kind of obvious. And sometimes there are things that go on around us in our society that have become so normalized in our lives that we let them in with an open door, or at least we don't spot the signs. Hear a noise at night downstairs, you might have a robber breaking in. Feeling drained, empty, low on faith and courage, well, what's the thief and robber that could be contributing to that? And so as we go into 2025, let's awaken to the things that are stopping us from living life abundantly with Jesus as we are called to do. So if we just take a step back to understand the context a moment for John 10, imagine, the image that Jesus creates is of a flock of sheep in a threatening desert, that there's not much food or water about, and that there are predators everywhere which are making the sheep vulnerable. And in contrast to that, Jesus is saying that he is the gate by which the sheep can come in and find salvation, and he is the good and skillful shepherd that will look after the sheep as well. So if we are the sheep, and that's how we're meant to read the passage, that we're the sheep, Jesus is the shepherd, all right? Who is the thief and the robber? The one that tries to get into the sheepfold by some other way than through the gate. Well, the most probable answer that Jesus has in his mind was the Pharisees. They have been the target of Jesus' teaching all throughout the previous chapter, in chapter 9. They, along with another group called the Sadducees, they make up the main religious groups of Jesus' time that give him the biggest headache. All throughout the Gospels, we will see that these religious groups, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and so on, they give Jesus a hard time. Now, the Pharisees get bad press, but I have to say, I do have some empathy for them because they were doing what they thought was right in accordance with their worldview. That was upholding the Jewish law as contained in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And that was the way by which you lived your life and you served God. But the problem was that the law on its own, it couldn't save humanity. Only Jesus could do that. And on the other hand, you have the Sadducees who didn't believe in the resurrection. So, if there's no resurrection, then there's no good news. So this is how you can remember what's going on. We've got the Pharisees. The Pharisees, they were too far to see, okay? And you've got the Sadducees, they were too sad to see, okay? So the Pharisees, they were too far to see because it was all about laws, which brought them a long way from relationship to Jesus. And the Sadducees, they weren't living life to the full because they were too sad. They didn't believe in the good news of the resurrection. So not only were they deceiving themselves, but the real problem here that Jesus is concerned for the sheep is that they were deceiving other people as well. Thousands of years later, there are many things that are deceiving us when it comes to life to the full. And so if we go back to that image of the sheep pen in the desert, imagine the Pharisees trying to break in with their law, but what is it that's trying to break into the sheep pen today to distract and deceive? Back then, the biggest deception may have been life to the full is found through laws. But today, I think one of the biggest deceptions is that life to the full can be found from within yourself. Often, the amusement and entertainment of oneself is what takes priority over everything else. And if that's striking a chord, it might be helpful to ask yourself, what do you spend your time thinking about? What is it that you spend your money on? What is it that you spend your time doing? Maybe it's obvious for others, but the good news is that by coming to Jesus, he wants to break loneliness, selfishness, worry, busyness, unbelief, addiction, cycles of abuse. The thief and robber of today's world is any voice that draws people away from God, claiming to be life to the full can be achieved by any other means. That is what the thief and the robber is of today. So let's just take a moment to think about that, because the truth is that those who refuse to engage with Jesus as the Messiah or listen to the truth of Jesus' teaching or don't actively live that out in their lives, they keep themselves on the outside of the sheepfold, of life to the full. So, I wonder now, how is it we've defined the thief and the robbers, but how is it we now define life to the full? What does it practically look like? Well, the word life here in this text, it means here biological life, so it's life that is lived. Some would jump in here and would define that as a wealthy or a healthy life, just as our King's Kids wonderfully demonstrated for us. And with that, the so-called prosperity gospel or prosperity teaching is common. And that is that Jesus is going to give me whatever thing I desire, whether that be money or possessions. But if we believe that to be life to the full, then that's actually very dangerous. Often in false teaching, there is some truth that we just run to the hill with. The truth is God does love to bless us, okay? But that's not what the focus is here. And, we just need to see people's social media profiles to see what the world's understanding of life to the full is. Since when did photos of getting drunk on a weekend constitute life to the full? Since when does having piles and piles of presents stacked high under the Christmas tree, when does that constitute living life to the full? Yet this is what society is all too quick and willing to show as life to the full. How have our priorities got so skewed? But here's the thing with that kind of understanding of life to the full, is that it is always going to be tempered by tomorrow immediately. In other words, there is always going to be more. There's always going to be something else that we could have. There's always going to be something more that we could strive for. And what happens is instead Jesus flips it round and he immediately starts talking about in later verses how the shepherd is going to give up his life for the sheep. So all of a sudden it's not about how much can I get, but it's about how much can I sacrifice and how much can I give. So it's simply about Jesus. Church, remember, money will run out. Netflix shows will end. There'll always be another series. Fullness of life has cosmic significance. It's the life that extends beyond the horizon that we can see. And Jesus' claim, it has cosmic significance. It is beyond the material. It is beyond the instant gratification. But it is the bigger picture of, yes, here and now, very much so, but also forever. So we see that Jesus knows all too well how hard it is for us sheep to navigate, which is why he offers to be the good and skillful shepherd. This was something he was always sent out to do. We have another passage in the Bible which helps us with this. It is Psalm 23. So you're welcome to turn with me if you've got your Bibles with you. And it says this. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right path for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." So we see here that a good shepherd will find food. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. So he helps us find food in verse 2. Also in verse 2, we read, "He leads me beside quiet waters." So he provides water for us. We see that he provides safe paths of righteousness, we read in here, and places of safety from danger. We see that in the presence of my enemies, he protects us. And so here's the thing about this passage, is that there is no self-help book, influencer, or Christian leader, not even myself, that has all the skills to be able to do that apart from the Good Shepherd himself. And the trend nowadays is that people will turn to influencers on social media more than leaders that leaders that genuinely know and care for them. To live life to the fullest, we must recognize the voice of the one who can lead and feed them. I was doing some mentoring with someone this week, and we were talking about different goals for this year. And they used a more modern example of that of the shepherd. And they were saying that God had given them a dream one night. And in that dream, Jesus was telling them to let Jesus get out of the back seat and to put him in the driving seat. And I thought that that was a wonderful vision of really what it means to be led by Jesus this year. A wonderful, more modern vision than perhaps the shepherd that we might be familiar with. But that's exactly right, because a good earthly leader will point people beyond themselves to look at Jesus. You know, in an age of church leaders caught up in scandals, we need to support church leaders as they too discern how to tackle those who are out to kill, steal, and destroy. And so my job is to point you not to follow me, but to Jesus, because he is the only one who has all the skills that are required. He is the only one. I'm sorry if that's a disappointment, but that's also good news. That we can wholeheartedly put all our trust in him because we know that he has the skills. Now, what I want us to do is I want to finish with a classic illustration as we think about making room for the Good Shepherd. So what I've got here, I'm going to do a little bit of rearranging. Okay. So here we have some items. Dare I move it without it falling? We've got here empty jar, empty glass. You know, if we think of this as us in 2025, okay, we've got here some really big rocks. Okay, now these big rocks, they represent things that are really important, the most important things in our lives. Okay, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that might be. And then here, we've got some smaller rocks, okay? Now, these are things that are important, okay, but they might not be as important as the bigger rocks. And then finally, what I've got here is I've got some sand. And the sand, it represents things in our lives that we often fill our lives with, but actually aren't really important, or at least they shouldn't be important, okay? So here's the illustration, is that often what we will do is we can fill our lives, first of all, we will put into our lives things that are of lesser importance. Now, I don't know, it might be chasing some of these things up here, like, yeah, money is important, but it's not that important to spend the rest of your life chasing, or filling our life with TV, filling our life scrolling social media, okay? So this is us. And now we're being filled up with social media, with TV, with Netflix, okay? That all goes in first. And then we think, well, okay, yes, I've had my TV fill, all right? And now, what about the things that are actually still quite important? Well, we might think about our friends, and we might think about our family. We might think about our job. And so, yes, you know, this fills our life as well. And then, so we're already quite full, aren't we? And we haven't even talked about the really important things. So, okay, well, how about then things that are really important? All right, what about our faith, our relationship with Jesus? What about being involved in our church community? So we say, okay, well, how about I now try and fit these things in, because these things are actually also quite important. Well, we see, don't we? Actually, it doesn't really fit in. Now, here's the thing. What we realize, and what I don't want us to do in 2025, is to do it this way round, okay? I want us to think about what are the things that are most important, okay, and think about how we put those in our lives first. So if we reverse this, we go. By the way, apologies if the kitchen's messy. I was testing this out before the service. I did try and clear it up. So there we go. We'll take out the big stuff, and we'll try and do it again. I'll put these rocks in here. And I will put the sand in here. Put the sand back in here. Okay, now we've got our empty jar. So how about in 2025, if we think about what is most important to us, the big rocks. So my experience of Life to the Full is that it's something that doesn't just happen. Like Life to the Full, it doesn't just fall on our laps. It's something that we have to be very intentional about, because I know that if I'm just not very proactive, then I'll tend to turn to the stuff that's not important. All right? But what I intentionally want us to think about, Life to the Full in 2025, is starting with the really big things, the really important things for us. So we start by putting those in, because we say that this is our priority for this year. So I put those in. Now I've put those in. Now what I'm going to do is I'm then going to prioritize the things that are of more importance, but not quite as important as those big things. So I put those in. And then finally, I've got room for other things that are, they're enjoyable. Some of it may be important, but it's not of most significance. And what we'll find is that when we get our priorities right, we will have room for all that we need, and a bit more as well. Ta-da! Do you get it? So, church, let's get our priorities right. And so, if we think about the big rocks that are now at the bottom because they were the first in, what are some of the big rocks for us? Well, here are some things for us to evaluate. First question, have you made a commitment to follow Jesus this year? If yes, is God calling you to express that through a way that you might not have done that yet? That might be through baptism, for example. If no, do you want to make a commitment today? Or do you want to explore more, perhaps through an Alpha course? Because as we've already shared, Jesus is the only one that can bring fullness in our lives. And so therefore, that is most important. But another thing that is really important for us as a church, one of those big rocks as a community, is regular attendance and involvement at church and in our church community. A consumer mindset will think, well, nobody will miss me if I skip church. I don't even like James's sermons anyway. That's the enemy that's trying to deceive. At Millen Baptist, you are part of a family where you are known and loved. Imagine if you have a big family celebration, and it's not the same if you've got a key member of that family missing. And that's exactly what it's like here at Millen Baptist Church, that if you're not here, you are really genuinely missed because you are known and loved. And it's a place where together we search and we look for God. And so regular patterns of being present with your church family will mean that we will be leading each other closer to the Good Shepherd. Another big rock this year is healthy rhythms. Do you have patterns that are healthy? Do you have rhythms of prayer, fasting, rest, and Sabbath? There is worship and prayer that happens in the week, but we can help equip you as well in your personal times. I also think that that is a big rock for us this year and for me as well. Giving. If you are a member, do you give money, time, hospitality? Jesus has given us everything so that we could live life to the full. He gave us life eternal through the forgiveness of sins. And so the question is, how do we reflect that generosity back with our lives? There are also studies that show some of the happiest people are also the most generous. Lastly, accountability and spiritual growth. Are you part of a small group, or can you join one? I also want to challenge us to think of one person that we are being discipled by this year, and one person that we are discipling. In some context, that might be the same person. But that's how we're going to grow spiritually as well. So you see, maybe actually those might not have been some of the big rocks that you might think about. Now, part of that may be, because life for you looks a little bit different. But also, just as a little pushback, maybe it means that we need to reevaluate what those big rocks have been in our lives. And if you feel like something needs to change, then maybe you might like to try one of those things if you recognize that that's something that's missing in your life, to see if that's a big rock that really does make a difference and is important. Now, what I want us to do is just end there, and I just want to take some time to invite the Holy Spirit. Let's just wait in silence, in quietness. Yeah, come, Holy Spirit. Come, speak to us. Come, fill us. I want to confess that silence for me, it feels a little bit odd. It feels a little bit unnatural. And for some of you, you may have been feeling really peaceful. Some of you may have dozed off to sleep. For others, you may have felt a little bit uncomfortable about the silence, about the stillness. And, if that was you, I hear you. But I also want us to realize that that's about making room. There's so much in our lives that's about go, from one thing to the next, that actually a long period of silence is intentionally saying, God, I want to make more room for you. And so what I sense that we should do now is I want to officially close the service. So what that means is if you've got kids in groups, you may want to go, if you can go and relieve them at 5:30 from their groups, from the leaders. But if you want to go and get some tea and coffee, you're very welcome to do that. But Felix and the band are going to lead us now in a great time of worship. There'll be extended time of worship for a while. They've got a worship set they want to lead us through. So I'd love to encourage you to stay and to worship a bit more. You might want to receive some prayer as well at the front. Jeff and Elaine, would you be available to pray with people? So Jeff and Elaine here, they can pray with some people as well. So make room for God now. We're going to worship some more. There's tea and coffee if you need to do that. But church, bless you. Thank you so much. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week as we look at Mark chapter 1. So a big thanks to you all who came, and a big thanks to those who helped out on various teams today as well. Bless you.